again, I would ask anyone who wants to speak to indicate by using the raise hand function on Zoom. In the meantime, I would start by asking Moiji. Um, so in terms of spontaneity, um, basically, what would you summarize? Given from I know we've had the presentation, but uh, as the strengths and how would the strengths be relevant today? Is continuity something that we should look forward to? Is it a case that um, without spontaneity, or it's like waiting for spontaneous action, nothing can really happen? Well, how would you put it, OAG?
Um, thank, thank you. I don't know if I'm audible or everyone can hear me. Am I audible?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. So, I think due to the exploitative nature of the system and how it churns out, misery and oppression, there gets to a point where it makes life or living miserable for people, and then there tends to be spontaneous action. That's natural. People just rise up and say, look, we can't take this anymore, you know. So, and being caught off guard, the ruling class, struggles to find its foot on the ground and scampers and doesn't know what goes on, and it's still running here and there, especially in the NSAS, the beginning stage of the NSAS, you could hear, we don't have any leader. This is this, yes, they must NSAS, then they were running helter-skelter, inviting different artists, inviting different personalities to just see how they could quell the revolutionary drive or the instinctive action, of the people. But the ruling class now falls back and realizes that they still control the state, they still control the superstructure of society. They can look inwards and see how they can destabilize or undermine this action. And that is where, at that boundary, where the ruling class changes its tactics, as Fanon said, where it changes its strategy and regroups, that is the boundary where spontaneity starts to lose, its effectiveness. Because then the ruling class will pull on the state, as it did to massacre people at Lekki toll gates. It's pulled on its friends, at the concession company to take the camera off. It pulls on its friends at the media not to report it properly. It pulls on his friends at the immigration, or the immigration itself, to seize the passports of people that are the organizers. It pulls on his friends at the DSS, that's the National Security State itself, to harass and carry or go pick people up in their houses, So the ruling class
We can't hear you.
Their power to oppress and dismantle the organization. And again, in the class aspect, where the lumpen proletariat, that's the lowest of the low, the poor people, where they brought them to the protest ground to dismantle protesters, gave them, some were paid as low as 500 naira, 1,500 naira. Though the masses repelled them, but you can see that these things, this age-old strategy and tactics, are the things that the ruling class falls back upon. They are very conscious of this class divisions in our society, and they know the masses of people that they can reach out to, or that they can, offer a little piece of bread or money to disrupt revolutionary organizations. So if we have a movement, that arose from spontaneity, or that one action triggered, and it still carries on forward, it just gets up onto a point where that spontaneity burns out. When we start taking, Fanon said, when we start taking casualties, then what now happens? What are the strategies? Where do we go to? And again, it shows that there must be need for us to understand that the system is the problem. The organizers were saying, oh, they didn't want revolutionary people there. They didn't want revolution now. People there, they should get away from the place. They're only just wanting to end SARS. But revolution now, or NSAS is a subset of revolution now. It is part and parcel of it. Police oppression and brutality is part of the things that we want to get out of our society, but we can't do that without overturning the structure, that is manifesting the need for police oppression. So spontaneity has a point where it carries the masses up onto. But after the point where the ruling class changes its tactics and starts moving in a coherent and orderly manner, then the need for revolutionary organization, starts becoming very apparent, which is the thing that I would say plagued the NSAS movement, because I think the young people, the organizers that history has pulled onto the forefront of the struggle at this moment in time, aren't too aware of the mode of operation of the state, because when you listen to them talk on Twitter or you see what they post, they're still expressing surprises, something that is constant or normal knowledge amongst us on the left, that the state itself is a manifestation of class antagonism, is a tool in the hands of the ruling elite to do what it's supposed to do in terms of keeping the people down, repressing them. When we question the fundamentals of an expectative arrangement of society, so they still keep asking questions. Look, they're harassing us, immigration is harassing us. They will do it. That's what they will do. So if we had entered the NSAS movement, or if the NSAS organizers had understood this, then I think the strategy would have been different. That's where revolutionary organization edges out or makes spontaneous action, look unfavorable, and which is so, because spontaneity can only go so far. So I think that's a summary. I just took components of the situation on ground to just explain and buttress the point that there's only so much, or there's only so long or so far as spontaneity can carry us on to, so yeah, that would be my own assessment of what we have on ground. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, AG. That helps to relate the book to our current situation. Um, I've got a couple of hands up, so take Bumi.
Yes.
You're free to speak. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That was like such a good summary of really, you said almost everything I wanted to say. And when the NSARS movement first started, I was very weary. I'm sure I wasn't the only one in this call who was weary, because I kind of like knew what was coming, and the fact that everyone was surprised, and the whole people like he says, when the casualties start, I was weary, because when that started, I knew that people were going to start getting discouraged, and people were going to start getting sad and being like, oh, why do we even need to continue? What's the point? And I think that one of the big things for me in this chapter is how Fanon talks about how the people, draft their own parties and their own what they want to achieve, in comparison with what's going on in the metropole, what goes on in England or the US or in France, and countries where people still see these people as evolved, as not backwards as we are, people, where people still see these people as the standard. And how, like, obviously how there's a weakness in that, because our situation is nothing like there's so it doesn't really make any sense to do that. But there's like, there's still a lot of people who feel like, the US, or modeling our own parties, or modeling whatever it is that we're doing after them, is going to be the thing that liberates us from the situation that we're in. And also, like, seeing how the people who were mobilizing this past like NSARS thing, how like the fact that they didn't really have that much revolutionary knowledge or potential, how they didn't really know what's really going on, how they're still like expressing surprise, how that's very dangerous to the lives that they have, under their I guess command, the lives that they have, that they're, people that they're encouraging to fight and be at the front lines, and how like the disconnect that they themselves possess, as far as I can see, how they themselves don't seem to really like know what's going on, how they themselves seems to be also kind of part of the class that's oppressing and trying to like liberate, how there's a dissonance there. And I feel like until they address that fact that, oh yes, we are the people mobilizing, but we have an immense class, a privilege that enables us to mobilize people in this way. We're still just going to be like running in these like unnecessary circles. And like I see, because like as we know, like society mirrors itself. I see like the same circumstances repeat, like that's larger in our community, repeating itself in these smaller circles, like in SARS, where people are, for lack of better wording, hyping people up as a leader, the same, putting the same people who are mobilizing in the same, I don't know how to explain this, but in the same, holding them in the same regard as they would like a leader of like a party, or like, not really understanding that they themselves have the power. And I think that's really where like it like hits for me. Like we like the people who are like at the front line, they still don't realize that they're the ones who have the power. They're the ones, in control in a way. They're the ones, what they say, matters and goes at the end of the day, not the people mobilizing. Like they don't have to. Your fate is not in their hands. Your fate is in your own hands. And I felt like this entire like NSARS thing, that was something that we haven't, as a collective, or people in the front line on the ground, haven't like realized. They're still very much, hinging their bets on whatever the people who are mobilizing do, and tying their fate with, oh yeah, they like waiting for them to revamp it, or waiting for them to activate something in them again. And yeah, like he says, I just think that that's just very that's just a dangerous thing. So
Thank you for that. That was quite insightful, and I think uh, that's the beauty of Fanon of this book, how it relates to the struggle that we are living through now, we're witnessing, and the struggle itself that we have to learn lessons from. And I think there's a thing that the Fanon was trying to do in that book, and it's quite important. It's that there's this issue about theory, having an understanding of theory, but having the understanding of society, like you could, and the mass of people may not in that sense. And we sometimes have this understanding that we go out there and we organize people, and then they will be ready, and then they will go. And I think something Fanon was trying to do in that book was speak to how struggle is this thing that is lived practically, not necessarily by theory alone. That even you, the teacher, or you, the educator, is going to come to struggle and to learn, to practice. And in the book, to me, I always look at it as kind of like outlining a kind of a story, in the sense, it's obviously history, the history of struggle. That you do this, you make mistakes, you learn from this, and I'll come back to some of that to treat what I'm saying. That and spontaneity is not necessarily something you say is good or bad. It just is. It's something that is going to happen. That you have as a revolutionary, you have to be prepared for it. You have to build organization, and you have to know how to work within it. It's not. It is a thing. It's a reality. But it's also the field of learning, both for you and for the mass. The mass learns so much. Like, for example, during the instance, there was this thing about not wanting the revolution to be associated with it. So just going to be focused on SARS, not even really on police brutality per se, but SARS. And as the experience went, as the people swam in the water, let me put it that way, because that is how you learn to swim. You should dive into the water and swim, and nobody's going to tell you theoretically how to swim. But as the people swam, they understood that SARS was not the issue. And they began to, in two different slogans, understand that it was a revolutionary question that was being asked. And also, in the sense that the organizers and the revolutionaries would have a dialogue with the people. I think that Fanon was putting that out. Recently, I was reading, something about Paulo Freire, who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And funny enough, Freire read Wretched of the Earth after he had written Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and actually said he had to rewrite it. And it is in Pedagogy of the Oppressed where he talks about having a dialogue with the people you are trying to educate. Education is not a one-way street. So that was the influence that Fanon had on Paulo Freire, and I think we've seen that in practice. Now, like I said, I'll come with some examples throughout the book, so many, that we've seen during our own recent practical experiences. Of course, we have Fanon in order to learn from history. So now, I will take Idris, please. Like, you have the floor, Idris.
Thank you very much, Comrade Shango, and Comrade OAG as well, for the wonderful presentation. As always, the angle I'm going to take here is, I guess, to ponder over a conflict that I engage with all the time, and it goes along the lines of the discussion Fanon had about how the nationalist parties tend to forget that most of the revolutionary fervor is usually in the rural areas where most of the underclass population exists. And they therefore focus on the 1%ers of urban dwellers in the cities and other urban areas, and try to maintain some parts of the culture of the colonizers, in fact. Now, the conflict in me is this. Obviously, the point of any revolutionary movement is to bring about revolution, and that's the that's the end goal. But the tactic is not necessarily fixed. It can be anything. And there are two movements I've seen arise in Nigeria that are following different tactics. So one of them is playing it out within the system, not necessarily being part of the system, but creating your own party and then going through the all of the processes, like the electoral processes, registration, and all of that. And we all obviously are aware of what is going to happen. The ruling class is going to try as hard as they can to prevent you from going all the way. And this highlights the importance of this kind of approach, because at every step of the way, it exposes the hypocrisy of the ruling class to the urban dwellers especially. And on the other hand, going the revolutionary route, which is mobilizing people to radically demand what is rightfully theirs, that too is a tactic that we've seen applied historically, and is usually used by the people with the most revolutionary fervor, like the 99%ers that Frantz Fanon mentioned. Now, here's the problem, why I think the conflict resides in me, because recently I've been trying to figure out what percent of Nigerians engage with or at least are urban dwellers, or people who interact consistently with the urban lifestyle versus people who are rural dwellers. And the most recent figure puts that at around 50%. So that is half of the population. It's by no means negligible, right? Like, this is a significant part of the population. And of course, the other 50% is just as equally non-negligible. So the question for me, the conflict therefore is, are we to then focus on trying to show the urbanites, because there is no way that they're just gonna, get up and suddenly be interested in revolutionary approach? So should we focus on trying to show them the futility of the system? This means the painful, arduous process of going through all of the systems that have been put in place by the ruling class, like electoralism, all these campaigns and all of that? Or are we to just ditch them and go directly for the towards the non-urban dwellers and take advantage of the fact that there's some ready revolutionary fervor? But that also poses the other challenge of then trying to radicalize them with revolutionary education, which Fanon mentions. But in a way, I actually think that it's probably easier to radicalize the non-urban dwellers than the urban dwellers. So I wonder what your thoughts are, what you think about this anyway, before I waffle on for too long.
Yeah, thanks, Comrade. I will leave the question open and we can call back OAG, and but it's an open question I think we should discuss. It's a very good question. So it's open to the floor in general for anybody to contribute on, and we.
Can I say something about that, or say something on that?
I want to come back. I'll take Baba.
Okay. All right.
Okay. It's open to the floor, but I'm certainly going to call you OAG to answer that. We're not going to forget the question. So, Comrade Baba, please, you have the floor.
All right, comrades. Thank you very much once again. I would want to quickly speak to one or two issues, so I'll try to be brief on each of them. First, on spontaneity. Along with the fact that it has both weaknesses and strengths, is also that the dichotomy between spontaneity and organizedness in rebellions is actually an artificial one. Well, going through the entirety of Fanon's, this is also quite clear. I'm teasing it out. Interestingly enough, one of the books I'm reading now is David Massey's Franz Fanon, a biography. But even within the Wretched of the Earth itself, you see that going through the whole thing. But these particular areas focus on spontaneity, and then another issue, some of which Idris spoke to. But it's essential not only to point out that there's a dialectical relationship between spontaneity and organization, but to also show that that dialectical relationship is multifaceted in many ways. Why do I say so? One, Gramsci focused on one aspect of it when he said that even the most spontaneous actions have leaders. It's just a matter of, at what level. There is micro leadership, there is meso leadership, there is a broader leadership. Even the practice of, calling out, chanting, bringing, it is leadership. And for me, theory and practice always have to be linked together. And a lesson for this, for us, for practice, is also about building the capacity, the organizing capacity of revolutionary cadres as much as their theoretical grasp. Because at times, when I've seen situations, and I'm talking from my experiences in June 12, I've seen situations where some of the most clear-headed comrades were useless, where we got to to use a Yoruba word, Oju Agbami, where, hey, yawa gas. How do you seize the situation? At times, in some of the places during this EndSARS, part of it was, the even liberal elements despite they could, some in some instances could seize the situation. Also, leadership is not just at that acme point. Leadership permeates, and conversely, possibly lack of it if it is not exercised. So, but not to lose track of things is that is about leadership. To also borrow still from Gramsci, I mean, leadership boils down to two things essentially: providing education and providing direction. And this is at several levels. But the other part is this: often, when we talk of spontaneity, we are looking at the immediacy of it. But that immediacy itself has roots. What are those roots? Those roots entail consistency. So, as I was saying, so it's also that being organizedness is important. It's not accidental that Tunisia was more thoroughgoing. Yes, Bouazizi burning himself was that spontaneous part, but here was a place where you had a long-standing left culture and organization. Because of that, I'll just also use even our own experience. June 12, July 7 was a spontaneous day. That was when one would say the June 7, the June 12 struggle as a revolutionary potential started. But that spontaneous, in which about 1 million people came to the streets, it did not just happen. It took even us by surprise, but because we were organized, we could seize it. Why do I say it took us by surprise? We called for it, but when we were discussing with Beko a few days earlier that, well, Beko was thinking that we might be able to get up to 5,000 people on the streets. But those of us that went out said we can get up to 10,000. We had about 1 million. The most conservative estimate was by Daily Times, it put it at 800,000 people. But because there was that organization, so there's that dialectical relationship. I'll stop at that with that. And then the second one about the lumpen, and I'll try to tie it to the issue of rural urban. It's a long-standing thing. I mean, when you look at even the French Revolution of 1789, the Rose of the Saint-Curio, you look at Italy and all that. Some also describe them as like the marginal mass. You know, it has a both negative and positive role, destructive, because a revolution itself has both its destructive and its constructive moments. The constructive moment, the moment of creation, it cannot come without the destruction. And that is part of why the issue of violence, which Franz Fanon grasped adequately, is a very important one we can't run away from, because those that hold power will not just willingly hand it over. And our relationship, in a sense, it also has to do with the issue of leadership. I remember the July 7 that I mentioned now, the practical leadership on ground was being given by lumpen. I moved people from Mushi, I and now Professor Femi Obayori. But the actual leader was Said. But because he's someone to tell people we had known each other, we smoked together, this and that, we could exert. So part of what this also means is, how do we relate with the lumpen proletariat even before moments of sparks, without having illusions in it? But this having been said, I also think that some of the descriptions of the lumpen proletariat as largely landless peasants that came to the city, which was the norm at the period of, don't forget, Franz Fanon was writing just, in fact, the independence movement had not been spent in Africa. But now, the lumpen proletariat is different, and this has consequences. The lumpen proletariat are not people that were landless in the rural area that moved to the urban areas. Estimates put urban population and as against rural, even in Nigeria, at about 50-50, at worst 40-60. Most of the lumpen in our cities now are not People that were born in villages and became landless, or were born into landlessness and moved in. Most were born in our aggregates, in our machines, in our ajegunles, and so on and so forth. These have, impact on how on the thinking. And I would want to tease further into this, but one, I wouldn't want to go so much into your time, and also I have to leave. But in summing up, I mean, once again, I want to commend May for this, and stress, which I know, I mean, May has also at the fore of its thinking, consistently tying theory and practice, and that theory should entail, political education as well as organizing training, and tie this to our story. I seriously believe, I didn't talk much on NSAS now because a lot of people have said it, and it's something we still have to keep coming to. But what it shows is that we have entered a period that will be very decisive, a tumultuous period, a period of flux, and we should do our best to be able to seize this by being clear-headed and organized. Thank you very much, comments.
Thank you, Comrade Babaye. Very good, and with some, some points for thought there. Usually can come back to some of those questions in terms of the lumpen proletariat, or those comments. I would like to give the floor to AG to answer first of all about the question from Idris, in terms of the rural population, which Babaye has also addressed and added a question about, or a comment about the lumpen proletariat, and how do we, in that light, in our some challenges in terms of the importance of organizing before spontaneous action was put there. So OAG, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think Babaye did an excellent job of just dishing out all that, I would have said, or even not even said, like, perfectly. And again, the nature of the lumpen proletariat has changed, because we should come to understand that, in the colonial, or just getting out of the colonial context, our production level, industrialization, I won't say we have industrialization anyway, but then you see that the nature of the lumpen proletariat has changed. A lot of them are born in the cities. It's just that they are out of the class that is kind of somehow absorbed in, let's say, they are the lowest, the peasants, the people, I said peasants, the people that stay in Ajegunle, people that stay in Agege, people that don't have anything to do, just loaf around in the cities. They are the ones that are the exhaust, that come out of the exhaust pipe of this capitalistic system. They are daily churned out in this our structure. So we have to understand the nature of these people. And then again, it's very important to make good analysis of where we are, in the revolutionary context, so that whatever we diagnose will be properly, or whatever we're going to use in terms of our solution, maybe in terms of organizing people, in terms of politically educating them, will be effective, so that we won't go on a wild goose chase and then wonder why our tactics do not work. That's very important. And then on what did Idris mention? I think Idris mentioned let's see. I think it's important to just have a political education program, and of course organize people and look for how to practically bring the lumpen into political consciousness, political awareness, and the use of social media to also tackle the naivety of the middle class, or the disappearing middle class that's on Twitter, that's working hand to mouth, or that's trying to make ends meet, because we have a chunk of those people too that are very unconscious, that still think, the system is because we have bad people there and all that, that's why it's like this. They don't know that inherent in this system is doing exactly what it is supposed to do, that is to enrich and give power to the ruling class and make a mess of the lives of the other people outside of the ruling circles, so they still have this illusion that, oh, if we do the system very well, we'll get the best, we'll get this, they have to be educated to understanding that fact. And then, I think that's about it. There has to be practical action, practical political action, practical political education action, and organizational actions. So that whenever, and this spontaneity that we said, it's been happening since, like I always make this example, I always tell people that the police has been harassing people in Ajegunle since, like, if you listen to Baba Frayo's song, if you listen to all the songs that come out of Ajegunle, they've always been, since we were kids, they've always been talking about police repression, police coming to just pick you up and all. So it's not like it happened overnight. But what direction are we going to go in? That is what the revolutionary organization answers. So yeah, that's what I feel it should just be added. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Reggie. So yeah, I think the question from Idris was about the rural population, in terms of the focus of organizing, in a sense that now we have about 50-50, and the issue of them being revolutionary. How do we tackle the question? Because a lot of our work is focused in the urban areas, really. But we'll come back to that. I'm going to call Daku. Yeah.
Actually, we need to understand that the way of the colonialists and the way of the present ruling class that we have in this country is quite similar, because we can see with their disposition of power, we've seen massive repression, and the way they are able to keep putting people into poverty and things like that. So I just really want people to understand that the way forward in the struggle for the African people is quite similar. Is system change, because we have already seen the similarities of the colonial masters and the present ruling class that we have, and their psychological thinking is quite the same. They don't have anything to offer. They just want to use the human resources of the people to gather more wealth and put people in extreme poverty. So the way forward, like Fanon have said, is that because we really have a lot of people who are not ideologically conscious about the way forward, about to improve people's lives, because majority of our people in Nigeria, let me say in Africa generally, are still attached to this syndrome of divinity, whereby they believe that the way forward to push this country is by prayers and things like that. But it's even part of how the society itself is able to diminish the thinking faculty of the people, unable to see physical and physical input on how to move the life of the people forward. So it's a little bit different now, because like Baba is have said, the people that are no longer the one in the countryside, they are the one in the urban life right now. So what I feel we can do presently now is able to try to understand the symptoms that have risen from the failure of this system, because we realize that a lot of people are facing a lot of things, and it is even hard for the low people to be able to assimilate with theories and ideological work like that. So what I feel like we could try to organize people is for the day-to-day activities that they do suffer from, maybe from, e.g., we could see high rents and things like that. Easily, if we could able to use that as an example to analyze the society to the people, like the reason why you guys are paying a lot of high rates for rent is because of capitalism, it's because of so, and it's because of so. So if you can be able to analyze things like that easily to the people, they can easily assimilate to the struggle. Because, for instance, we can't talk about capitalism and these people don't really understand what capitalism is all about. But if we can be able to give them one or two examples that relate to their livelihood, then we can be able to bring the people up together, build a consciousness um, um, level into them. Because realize that the way forward in this our struggle is to be able to keep educating the people. Because we've seen in this SARS issue of 18, realize that majority of people that even join in the protests later on, as the time goes further, when government makes some stupid promises that things will get better, they're able to do one or two reforms. But we as revolutionary realize that all these things is still the way the colonialists did when people were pressuring for independence. We were just trying to do petty things to give a sense of humanity to those who are deprived. So we, the revolutionary, when we try to come out again in the second phase, like to to tackle what this government are saying, that they are not doing anything. You know, we see people start giving complaints like, why are you guys doing this? Why are you guys doing this? You guys to give the government a chance. But these people don't really actually understand because they don't have the political consciousness of where we are heading as a country. So I still feel like we still lack that political consciousness and we should be able to do more of education. So that's my submission for now.
Okay, thank you, Adebayo. Bumi, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Yes, thank you. I just have a couple of questions and thoughts. Just incongruent with whatever people are talking about the lumpen proletariat, and I'm just curious about what people think about the people who are still in the villages. I know that there are people, and if we're using like Lagos as like a hub, but there's still people in the villages and other towns that are not in Lagos who don't even speak the language that we're speaking currently. And when Fanon, when he talks about mistrust, I my mind goes to those people in the villages in the so-called like rural areas who who's still who their first language is still who still don't have who don't speak the language of the colonized, and who still have, at least I think, revolutionary potential. How do we, go about engaging them when there's obviously, that first barrier? I know someone was talking about Paulo Freire and Pedagogy Oppressed, and I know in that book he talks about, literally sitting in a circle and having an interpreter. In villages or in towns where he didn't speak the language, just to have someone who's from that community in dialogue with those people. And also, how do we drag people away from reformism? How do we get people to see that we're the ones who make the concessions and not them? And because we know like the tactics that our present ruling class is using is very similar, someone was just saying, to that of the colonialists. How do we, because I feel like the inherent position of colonialism is reformism, and so that's like, how do we get people away from that? How do we get people to see that that's not the answer? Like, and how do we get people to move away from the attachment they have to nationalism, the attachment that I guess we've all been, fed to. Like, all we see is, all we hear about, even from beginning, when you're, when you go to school in Nigeria, when you read, the history that's presented to us is, the fight for independence. Even the phrase "we're granted our independence," it's funny, but how do we like get people to investigate, and people in so-called rural areas, people who don't speak English, who are not engaged even on social media? Because I feel like even to be on social media, to be on Twitter, is like a privilege. So people who are not even on social media, who can't access, who don't have data, who have like actual physical, struggles, who are, who actually need to eat, how do we like engage them? How can you talk to them about capitalism or big ideas when there's a more immediate violence that they're facing in the hands of the state, like hunger? And how do we like get people away from reformism, which I feel like is inherent to this ridiculous system? So thank you.
Thank you. Those are very good questions, and um, I think we'll put it on the floor. Your first question is similar to what we just already asked, and I think that still remains unaddressed. You know, the question of the rural population and what do you do. So I'll leave that open on the floor for now. I will call AG a little bit in a little bit after I take the next speaker, and I will also try and have some input on that. So I would like to call Yinka to the floor now.
All right. Greetings, everybody. Am I audible? Okay. Yeah, I would like to speak on what Bumi just said about the lumping and the rural criteria, and also what Babaye said earlier about the lumping. I think nothing has changed except for the fact that the lumping is, let's say, the um, the phase or the description of the word in the present context is different from what we had in the colonial context. So I think that's the only difference that, where we mentioned that some of these mountains don't, in the colonial era, they had their own land, and they were not born, some were not born in the cities, but now we have some were born in the city. But it still doesn't change the fact that they're lumping, because what I see, the difference in my opinion that I see here is that the ruling class who've organized the society that we live in have find a way to into the different sectors or units that can actually help to advance the revolutionary causes. Take, for instance, the trade union, for example, as well, which was actually born out of a struggle by the workers. But today we have the leaders that have compromised, and they are actually working to sustain and maintain the status quo. All they do is deceive the people, and in as much as they're being paid through money, they just go back and go back to the shell, they don't complain. And we also have the lumping as well, who actually have been a tool for keeping the status quo as well. Because we saw during the SRS protest that they were the first people to be launched into the protest ground to come and disrupt the protest. It shows that we are not following the advancements that have been recorded since the colonial era, because what we have now is that we've disconnected ourselves from these people who can actually help us in the fight against neocolonialism and neoliberalism. And on the question of the rural proletariat, I think a lot of us are being we are being married to this colonial language, because I think I've suggested a few times in some revolutionary gatherings that we actually need to borrow tactics of these neocolonial leaders. We can go to the rural areas. Those programs, for example, speak to the people, bring them to the awareness of their exploitation at the hands of the ruling class. That's what we are supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to just rely on social media, because someone was mentioning earlier about capability. We don't have that resources to compete with people. They have the money, they have their paid analysts, political analysts online who they have a lot of followers. We don't have anything. In recent times, the only person we have is Showore, and we can see the amount of social media propaganda that has been promoted to paint his image and all of that. You know, we don't actually have a voice, and these are the voices that have been left by the leadership of the left in Nigeria. We need to find ways to correct all of that mistake because yes, we've learned from answers. Those are what we know. There's a lot of people who don't know, who don't have access to this knowledge and to this books, you know. To them, it is answer. And the COVID I just was talking about organizing people around issues that affect them. Yes, that is also one of the ways. And you were talking about reform, Bomi. For me, in my opinion, I don't think reform is actually looking at the Nigerian context, the way things are now. I don't think reform is actually bad. We need to go from reform then to revolution. Because we need the people, we have to understand that our people are not conscious enough to know that reform is actually bad. But through organizing, and we say, okay, we don't want so to happen in our unified voice, we demand for this and this because we cannot just say revolution. We need to carry the people along to let them see that these are the problems. Let us approach it one after the other. The ruling class will expose themselves to the people. We need them to expose themselves so that the people can actually understand what we're talking about. We know that reform is not what we're going to resolve all of these issues. We know. But our power is the people. The power we have is not conscious of the entire problem. So we need to help them come to that realization that reforms are not what will help us to take us to the promised land, but we need them to actually keep into reforms, in my opinion, to get to where we are going. Because when we ask for this, we are going to the next. We are going to the next, and before you know it, the users retire and they will want to come out. You know, they will review themselves, and in that way, the people then know that, oh, so you people don't actually want to give us this and that. So that way, we'll be able to have bring the people back to our side. There's a lot I want to talk about, but I can't remember everything. So that's my humble submission. Thank
you. Yeah, I mean, you come back when, of course, when you can remember and have other inputs. It just has grand but I also need to say a little bit later. I will take away the, but just before that, I just want to add to that point. The issue of reform, I just want to say very briefly, because I have more to say on that. But we saw it very clearly during the end thing, and it was an example of how you move from demand for reform to revolution. When people came for the entire struggle, they just wanted a little bit of reform, not much. They weren't asking for much. And if you just went there and just said no, it won't work, you can only have a revolution to solve this problem. A lot of people will not understand. That doesn't mean you don't say it, but it's a way of connecting the dots between that demand they have and supporting that demand they have for answers, widening it and making concrete demands that the state will never meet. The state will never meet these demands. And that is a practical way of people learning through that experience. And that is what happened during the answers, is that a lot of people learned to move from one reform, small demand, to go higher and higher, maybe not necessarily to reach a revolutionary consciousness, but then that is the job of the organizers. Fanon has some things to say about that. I'm going to come back to that question later because Fanon does address this issue in this chapter in a way. OAG, please. There's some questions on the floor and anything you want to add or give other input on. Then after OAG, thank you.
I don't know if I'm audible, but I'm assuming I am. So what would be the main problem for any revolutionary movement is not to make a proper analysis of the conditions on ground before moving into action. What is the level of consciousness of people, the material level of organization, from maybe rural to urban, if we're going to communicate with the urban, with the rural people, we know with the urban guys that are on social media, that are on Facebook and all these kind of things, we can, of course, push forward with propaganda, revolutionary material, like what MA is doing, what Socialist Workers League is doing, what Revolutionary is doing. That can cover, significantly to the urban population. But for the rural population, we have to now start building movements that target these people, maybe making material in their local languages, actually going there, setting up time to take a trip to the countryside, talking to people, forming a practical link. That's what Fanon said. We have to form a practical link between ourselves and these people to bring the message down, to them, to let them understand that, oh, this is the level, this is how things are. And then of course, these are the practical steps that we can do. You guys should start organizing, we should start doing this, then forming and opening a conversation or a communication channel whereby they can be we can relay information. Okay, do this, do that. Okay, we have to organize this. Take the programs, the revolutionary programs, over to those people and allow them to even build self-sustaining structures, self-sustaining organizations in those communities, so that they too can go ahead and spread the movement. So anything that revolutionary organization wants to do should look critically at those practical steps or measures, because we have to build the organization. Of course, requires money, so it requires logistics, because we have to take a trip to the countryside, and we're assuming that most of us here, we have jobs that we're doing. So how do we balance all that? Do we create like a fund where exclusively revolutionary people now dedicate their time 100% to the work, or take time off, or do we do it on weekends? We have to create a practical a practical approach or practical timetable for these things, so that we decisively and consciously bring these people on board. It has to be done, because if we have an urban link and a peasantry link in the countryside, then it makes the thing, makes the revolution complete and total, and that's how we are going to be able to win. But that work will not just happen by itself. It has to be done. Then we realize the power that social media has given to us anyway. Because now we might say that these people are in the villages, but they too, they are catching up on to these things. So are we going to start interpreting these things in our native languages? Are we going to we need to be creative, if we're going to get into the trend stuff, it would be cool to trend revolutionary topics. It would be cool to trend all these kind of things, so that we just need to give people an awareness and understanding of what is really going on in terms of the structure. And then again, if we have little, if we have a revolutionary organization that the people can trust, that the people can fall behind, then we know that this is to tackle the reform issue. Then we know that whatever concession we win, we are not naive to think that that is the promised land. We know where we are going to. So if concessions are won by a revolutionary organization that knows where it is going to, then we know that that concession is only a solid ground to ask or grab fully. It gives us a solid base, and a solid footing to stand on to actually grab more. So it depends on what the movement is standing on. If it is not standing on revolutionary principles and basis and leadership, then even if you get the concession and all that, it will still be beat back by the ruling class. That's certain. And that's what has happened, in the history of Nigeria. So we need to have a concrete revolutionary organization that is aware of its task, that is aware of the level of consciousness of the people, the historical level of consciousness of the people, and how to plug into those gaps and those holes, so that the bridge between the urban guys and the rural guys can be breached, and then we can have the kind of whole and full action that we desire. So I think that can be a solid approach, whereby we build programs that target these people. Of course, the urban masses can keep on plugging into social media. We can target at them too, and all. So yeah, I think that's like an approach that must be done. Practical links between the people, revolutionary urban and revolutionary rural, is a task that must be looked into.
Okay. Thank you, AG. This is Comrade Adenka speaking. deputizing briefly for Convention Board. He's not here, so I'm deputizing briefly. So thank you so much for the contribution, Comrade OAG. I think you added to what I need. So yeah, thank you for that. So we'll take Comrade Idris now. So Comrade Idris, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Comrade Yinka. And I think Comrade OAG has said it all, really. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the poser that Comrade Bumi raised about reaching out to people, non-urban dwellers. And my own take is basically just let the flyers echo their voices. And I don't just mean, speak the language and all of that, which of course is granted. We should take that for granted. But by echo their voices, what I mean is, listen more and speak less. Let them be the ones to say where the shoe hurts them. In Yoruba, I would say, and I don't know how to put it. Please don't laugh at my Yoruba, but they say "biti ẹni tó wọ bàtà ló mọ ibi tí bàtà ti ń ta lẹ́sẹ̀," or something like that. So whoever wears the shoe knows exactly where it hurts. So the point is to listen to them, and even if they are not revolutionary focused, they would most probably be focused on, the little issues like, oh, we want we want to have the right to plant more yams on more land or something. Let them say it and then produce flyers that would echo this exact sentiment, and then distribute it with them and say, look, listen, the reason why, and this speaks a bit again to what Comrade Adebayo said earlier on, that the reason why you can't plant 10 more yams is because there's this bunch of people who live in the city who are basically not using the land that you can plant your yams on, and at the same time not allowing you to use the land. So what are we going to do about that? How about we organize and we occupy the land by ourselves? Or how about we organize and we besiege the dwelling quarters of the local councillor or the chairman or something? So yes, echo their voices and let them rally around that thing that matters most to them, basically. That's my point.
Yeah, thanks, Comrade Idris. Yeah, I wonder in this context, have people seen the protests going on in India right now? Have we seen what's going on in India?
No, I'm not aware of it.
Okay, well, so at least one person is not aware of it, but two people here are not aware of it. But certainly people need to look out for that. And there's a massive uprising in India with farmers. As some estimates put it at 250 million protesters. I'm only mentioning that because of, in the sense of the level of organization among, because a lot of it is led by communist, socialist groups, who have, had, quite an impact. Traditionally in India, they have some strength in the rural areas. For me, I think the question of rural, there's a little difference I want to point out between when Fanon was speaking and now. The sense of there was a struggle for independence. And in that struggle, there was a cross-class alliance that was built. That, over time, of course, as Fanon outlined, the leaders of the struggle made a mistake in the sense that they focused on the towns. They were by necessity, not by choice, forced to go to the rural areas, and they now learned, to use from what issues of saying, it wasn't they who taught the rural people, it was the rural people who taught them certain things, like picking up the gun. And Fanon also speaks of having a very highly less individualistic, attitude, and also less westernized attitude, among the rural. It was very important in that struggle for independence. Today, now it's not a necessarily cross-class struggle, unless you put it as a struggle for democracy. But the struggle for revolution is now certain class alliances are broken in that sense. And I also ask if people haven't, that it's very good to read Class Struggle by Kwame Nkrumah in analyzing the dynamics of class within the rural areas. And then, that being said, the question is of course, a lot of the leaders of struggle here are repeating the kind of mistakes that Fanon was talking about, and have been for a long time. There's a lot of focus on the urban, and a focus on a tiny proportion, as he puts it, of the population, the working class, whether rural or urban, in a sense, the organized working class today still makes up a very small proportion of the population. Maybe, let us say, at best 20% in Nigeria, the organized working class. And I think, coming out of what we can understand from history is the rural thing. I think it brings to mind the importance of political party, a revolutionary political party. It makes it more essential because there's a way, the party becomes a platform to speak to the issues that affect people in the rural areas. And also, quite importantly, the ruling class have understood, they've always understood the importance of the rural population, and they use their political party to capture them. So it's a struggle in which you have to challenge what is going on there. Fanon even speaks. I just want to quickly that Fanon discusses. Just a second. How the colonialists use the rural population. They use tribalism, bribe the chiefs who are normally held in esteem by the rural masses. And sorry, there's somewhere else. I think I've lost it. 1 second. Colonialism funds creation of ethnic parties, and he says later on the same tactics will be used by the national opposition. After independence, the national government is made to pay for its laziness during the period of colonial rule and its unfailing mistrust of the country people. The nationalist parties don't try to organize the peasants, they don't try to educate or increase their awareness. The colonialist takes advantage of the distrust rural people have for townspeople, and they emphasize your mode of dressing, your mode of talk, and so on. We see that very much with the political parties today. The politicians dress in the rural style or the traditional styles. They know how to talk, the traditional way and so on. So I think, organization obviously is key to that. But I think a crucial part of way of doing that is through political parties, which people provides a platform for you to have the spread, both rural and urban. And yes, what Idris was saying is very important that, you echo their voices. You go and listen to people, um, and integrate that into the policies. That you have to develop policies. Again, why the political parties are important. Policies that can relate, help us to understand the difference between you and what the others are put on the table. But I think most importantly, you have to have that class understanding. The idea of just going to the rural area and thinking you're just going to one rural mass, I think it's something we have to be very careful of. There, as Nkrumah explains in Class Struggle, we have the peasants, the small peasants who have very little land, and we have the rural proletariat and who have no land. And those are the real key elements, the real revolutionary potential that we have to focus on. The idea that you can just go to rural people, farmers, in fact, my own interactions with people, they are very conservative. They are not in revolutionary ideas and so on because they are part of their exploiters. They are part of, the extent that they want to benefit from the system, want to reform the system. And let me not drone on too much. I do want to come to take the other point about reformism and revolution, but I see Bumi has a hand up. I'll take Bumi and then Yinka, who also has his hand up here. So Bumi, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I know I keep making this point to harp on this again, but Fanon talks about those who have the most to lose. And I think that the middle class, not only, or the upper middle class, not only in Nigeria or in Africa, but those who are in the metropole, who are in the center of the empire, who are benefactors from the empire. I think a lot of us here, I think that we underestimate how much benefit that people really get from the system, and how, sorry, not to use we, I'll say I, because every time I try to engage with people, there's always like that first barrier of like resistance, like, something as small as when you meet people or talk to people who are freshly, out of Nigeria, who or even people who have been in America, like in the UK and Britain for number of years, they're still very attached to, like, the material benefits they get from a system like this, this sycophant system, things like, having constant electricity, or having, a system that has the appearance of functionality. They're very attached to that, and every time I underestimate how attached people are to those benefits that they get, and I'm just, I just find those people to be very dangerous without, political consciousness, because even in this SARS thing, you saw people clamoring for sanctions, and it was very heartbreaking. And I was just thinking about how they, people who occupy the class that I do, and upper class people as well, how they can't reconcile, violence. When Fanon, talks about violence, when he has that phrase where he says, when you talk to the intellectual or something, they imagine drones and fighter pilots flying across their heads, and, they have a very active imagination. And how do you, I guess, make that connection and I know someone previously was talking about, what do you do with the middle class? And I don't know who has this phrase. Is it Castro or someone who has this phrase about, when the revolution comes, where will you be? And I think that there's no, at least for me, there's no begging or there's no pleading with at that point with, middle class or upper class people who refuse to see violence and, the little actions that we consciously take, and choosing to have people in poverty, and choosing to make people starve. And when you call for sanctions, knowing how sanctions work, when you're calling for that level of, economic violence against the masses of our people, like where's their mind at, where they sit in their, their ivory tower, when they sit in their ivory tower, and, and even even realizing that people engage with revolutionary text just for the aesthetics of it. Like, Obama's memoir that just recently came out, and we saw, him admitting to reading Fanon and Gibran, reading all these people solely to manipulate people. And someone, made a point that the upper class, they're very aware of what's going on. They're very aware of all these texts and all these books, and they're very aware of, these spaces, and they take advantage of that. How do we, I don't know. I don't know if it's, my question is, how do we engage the middle class, or do we even bother with do we even bother with that at all, engaging the upper middle class people and the metropole people and in the center of the empire who are affected by, I guess I say for my case, American exceptionalism, who are affected by, and their ignorance, or their arrogance is the word I'm looking for. Their arrogance, that they think that they understand the situation, leaks onto their relatives. And from what I've seen, people who, by virtue of colonialism and imperialism, automatically think that because someone is, has an accent, or someone, talks a certain way, is supposedly intelligent, someone knows what they're talking about, and their arrogance leaks onto people who we're trying to spread our own propaganda to. So how do we to what use are the people in the metropole, to what can we what is their contribution, and how do we steer them, if they're even steerable, I don't know if that's a real word towards the place we're trying to go, the revolution that we're trying to get in Africa and Nigeria. So I guess, yeah, that's my.
Thank you. That was brilliant. I know many people like Idris were nodding along. I think that was. I want to give over the floor to you guys, but just excuse me once. Because I think that point is very, very important about the class, the middle class. During the NSAS, I think people lost sight of the fact that the revolutionary groups, the strength is with the majority, the mass, and they are, these lumping proletariat, the working people, and so on. And there's also a lot of focus on social media that doesn't reach a lot of those people. So for me, it's something that can not be overemphasized. As I was saying just now about the rural population not being taken as one mass, our focus really has to be the majority, who are the people who have less to lose, as you said earlier. I don't want to take too much time. I'll come back to it, because I think it's something very important to discuss. But Linka has the floor now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Shongo. I was going to, earlier I said I forgot to say a few things. So I remember, and we already spoke about it. And it's about the issue of the urban proletariat, let's say today, the so-called middle class. In my opinion, I don't think you were asking, should we wake them up or should we abandon them? I think I just say you have to abandon them. Because if I were to look at their population, they are very few, minute set of people, and they are lost in this in the system, and they have this belief that, you're talking about the benefit they get from the system, they are not ready to let go of that. Fanon said they are not ready. They have so much to lose. They are not ready to let go of those things. I mean, they are so clingy to the oppression, the status quo. They just want to maintain it. They just talk about reforms. Like, let's just get let me say they talk about it, but they just lend their voice to reforms that doesn't affect the system, that helps them to continue to maintain their opportunity. I mean, the opportunities they get from the ruling elite class. So on the issue, while Bumi was speaking, something came to mind that we talk about. Commissioner who was talking about farmers. There's some farmers who don't sound revolutionary at all, but they're the peasants who don't have nothing, who are revolutionary. I think I would just like to say something about that because recently I was speaking to somebody. We can equate that to someone who doesn't have a job, who is part of the lower class in the city, who doesn't have a job. And I was speaking to this person that look, the country is bad. The reason why you don't have a job is because of this, liberal system in place, and there, And what this person was talking about is how to get to America. Just to go there and when you get to America. So they are not concerned about revolution, about anything that has to do with the system. Bumi was speaking brilliantly about how American institutionalism affects people. They feel there's a getaway from all of these things, and with the distractions out there. You see, study in Canada, come to Canada, all of these brain drain adverts, and with the distractions every and there, what we have to actually understand is that the ruling class, like we're talking about Obama, they've read this book. They just use it to, keep the people at bay, just not for them to focus on their exploitation and focus on them as the exploiter. We have betting, for example, or this betting have, these are distractions. So ask somebody who is actually suffering as a Nigerian that, look, this country is bad. Why don't you join in the quest for dismantling this system once and for all? They will tell you, no, they are not ready. Because they have those distractions there, thinking they will, once maybe they win a bet on win American with a lottery or Canadian with a lottery, then that's the end of their problem. These are just illusions. They are using to control their mind. So we have a bigger task than we are seeing. We need to actually study our society. What are the distractions? What is actually keeping the people from revolting against the system? So we must include that in our message. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I want to ask OJ and Idris if they want to contribute to the point of ground. None of you have your hand raised. OJ?
Yeah, I just want to kind of give what's it called, and a point that while the middle class itself is very, very complicit in this system, we have to also understand that sooner or later they will find out that the system itself lays waste to their class. It is what is making that brain drain possible, and it is what is making the middle class itself reduce in population. So the key components of the strain or the stress that is falling on the middle class now, in terms of now, we have to understand fully well that the government is increasing the price of services, the cost of goods in terms of food and every other thing that you know of in the country has skyrocketed. And these people, the margin for survival is very, very slim. That so-called middle class that we're talking about is encountering a serious assault on their existence. That is why you have so much, drive to get out, get this, which is understandable anyway, But now, the knowledge of the system, like not being able to connect these things to the system, is where I feel is the lacking, is what is lacking. Because if they're not able to see that this is what is actually causing it, then the only option they will have is just to back away from it or get out, So they have to see it, they have to have a systemic understanding, And when you interact with these middle class people, I saw Idris's post in the message section, and when you interact with them, you see they're talking from a very, very high level of ignorance. Like they're ignorant, they don't know anything. Forget that they've gone to school for college and all that. They don't know anything. Home and abroad, they don't know anything. If you've been abroad, you see they don't know anything. So they need to be educated. They need to understand that it is this system that is causing your hardship, and sooner or later it is going to lay waste to your earning capabilities or your ability to take care of yourself. You always be in this constant rush to survive, Though in the colonial countries or the neo-colonial countries, that margin for survival is very low. But when you get out of there, you can still have your crumbs, but you still pay your mortgage. It's called mortgage. Mort means to die. You pay it till you die. So those kind of things, I have to let them understand that, the marginal gains that you're having because you're inside. There's this analogy that this woman made. What's her name? Afyong. That people in the third world, or people in the this thing, we are near. Sorry to use, we are near the anus where the poop comes out from the beast. Then people that run to go inside of the empire, they are in the intestines, the large intestine, where they take undigested chunks and then feel like they are living the life. So people must be educated to see that this thing is a global system that makes a mess of humanity in general. And then the middle class of this country too must understand that there's an assault on their livelihoods, so they have to understand that, and it's our own work to reach out to them, be it urban, be it rural, to devise a method to effectively communicate to these people. So that should be the work. We have social media now. We should capitalize on that at least. Yeah, that would be my own rounding up submission. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything? Any comment?
Oh no, Comrade Shango, thank you so much. Everything has been said. I don't think I have anything to add to that, to be honest. Yeah.
All right. And
I have something
you had okay. Just a second, Bio. Bumi, your hand was raised earlier. Did you still want to say something?
No, I was just lowering it from the last time. Thank you.
Right. All right. Bio, Adebayo, you have the floor.
Yo, thank you very much. I don't really have much to say. I just want to add one or two things to what the previous speakers have said. What I just want people to understand that the middle class, they are just there for symbolization. What I meant by that is that a lot of this, within this class itself, what they actually meant for is to stand like an example to the suppressing class. Like, if you are loyal to the system one way or the other, you'll be able to reach the standards like this person are actually. E.g., we can see the likes of Obama, whereby majority of people see the symbolization of Obama as the let me say the freedom for the black people in America. But they really understand that symbolization is quite different from where we are going in this struggle. So we can actually relate this to on the issue of the middle class, because majority of this middle class feel like they are even within their class, they are trying to aspire off that class into the upper class. But they don't really understand, because they don't have this class consciousness that if they could check indirectly or directly in this country, the rate of the middle class is shrinking, because even the economic itself is not creating an enabling environment for them to expand. So that's the issue. That's the issue here, and it's even part of the educational system they have been given in their school and stuff like that. All this self mentality, individualism, like if you follow this path, if you do so thing, you get to this thing. But they don't really understand that it's the economic and the political ideology of the day that determines your level of improvement, things like that. So I just want to say, literally, for now, the middle class, whether they like it or not, they are still part of them who can still be loyal to the struggle in the future. But what I feel like presently now, we should just take away the struggle of the middle class. Then as time goes by, when the struggle for the struggle for change of system must have reached a certain extent, then we're able to buy one or two among them. So that's my solution.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to just add some points in terms of the questions before about both the question of reformism and of course now the question of the middle class. This chapter, I really love myself. There's so much to unpack. I think we've only done a little bit of justice to it, but something to. It's still been a very wonderful discussion Um, I think the sense of the question of reformism and the middle class. Both are related because the middle class are generally the ones who mostly want to push for reforms. And again, as we saw during the ENSAT, which was really pushed at the beginning by the middle class, who have now become caught in the net of police brutality, and they are essentially those who felt that you could get some reforms, and then you have the oppressed, the real oppressed, working people, the downtrodden, the lumpy proletariat, who saw that struggle, joined that struggle, because they could relate to it, not just in the question of police brutality, but in terms of the economic violence that affects them. And you could see towards the end of that struggle, not the end of that struggle, but going up to the 20th of the massacre, I saw this, direct, where the so-called hoodlums or the people from the lumping proletariat, the area boys and so on, we actually joined that struggle, not in the sense of any of these so-called looting and burning, but I saw them on the streets trying to ensure that there was an economic shutdown, to impose the people's power in order to take the struggle to the next level. And I think they are joining, actually really scared the state. And the state, of course, reacted with severe violence, and of course, we saw how things happened. So it really spoke to us about the need to go and, I was quite actually disappointed that following those events, there was no good organization, no movement. We have been fighting for this, wherever we have been, to go and organize in the communities, in the neighborhoods, to organize among, the working people, the downtrodden. So it was a real opportunity because they were getting to a stage that this was their struggle. It had gone beyond what the middle class wanted. An opportunity was lost at that point. It doesn't mean it's gone, but it also helps us to emphasize the need to focus on that, which, as I've explained to people with so much focus on the social media, I'm not saying the social media is not important, it's very important, but there are some people who just think it's the be and end all. That, look, the strength of our organization is with the downtrodden who are not necessarily on social media, and our organizing them will put us in the forefront of any struggle such as this, because at the beginning we were not at the forefront. So the middle class groups, the reformist groups that were at the forefront of that struggle, who were able to tell people not to give out flyers. I've never heard such a thing in my life, in a long life of struggle, to go to a protest and be told you can't give out flyers. That, to tell you have no freedom of speech in a struggle that is about freedom and rights. Never heard such a thing, and because they were scared to have this discussion become a revolutionary discussion. But that doesn't mean in any case that it's about abandoning or not abandoning the middle class. I think the issues that the middle class raise and the platforms they have and so on means that we should be part of whatever struggles are there, and of course to engage again, as we were saying before, about reform. You don't necessarily have to dismiss the struggle for reform. It's about taking it to the next level. It's about educating, and it's about breaking the illusions. But in anything we do, we should always be conscious about the class that we represent, the revolutionary class. And I think that's very important. And the thing again about this issue, this chapter being about spontaneity, the strengths and weaknesses. Fanon, in talking about the weaknesses, he talks about the need for organization, the need for education, and all this. He says, arising out of the spontaneous struggle, the leaders now realize the need for organization and raising consciousness. So it says hatred alone cannot draw up a program. And the danger of hatred alone, you're saying, oh, Buhari is bad, or this is bad, that is bad, the police are bad. And if that is the basis on which you are mobilizing people, it's very easy to bring in concessions. That's why, hatred can be disarmed through reformism and they pretend niceness. The colonialists start speaking better to you, and in this case, the new colonialists. So out of this is my conclusion that organization, as Kwame Ture said. Of course, we knew that before this, but there's a weakness of organization that has to be addressed within the left, and of political education, and of reaching out to the corporate masses. And I personally don't have an issue with whether we are present right now in the rural areas. I think if we are present in the urban areas and a lot of the struggles are there, we start to build from there. And then when we are strong, we must not, of course, abandon the rural. And in the rural, we mean the rural or the rural oppressed. We must not abandon the struggle, but our strength, our initial base is in the urban areas with radical, potential among many oppressed. And lastly, I want to say, because Baba was saying earlier that we don't have that kind of rural, people who live in the rural to form the non-people there. But I actually see elements of that increasing in recent years as the rural areas have become more abandoned. They have become, because agriculture has been abandoned by our government, by the neo-colonial government. Subsistence agriculture has been abandoned. Even crop agriculture, which I'm not saying is a good thing, the cash crop agriculture has been abandoned. We are, and there's a lot of deprivation in the rural areas. As a result, actually, in the sense when you are talking about the thinking middle class, you have a lot of farmers, a lot of people who actually, I laugh sometimes when I hear them talk, when I hear Keke Mara driver talk. I say, do you know how much land I had in the village? and now I'm here, hustling, driving a Keke Mara, there's a lot of rural, farmers, more well-to-do, not necessarily proletariat, who have sunk down to the level of the non-proletariat, sunk down to the level of, and are in the cities. And you see it, and it is increasing on a regular basis. So that connection is still there between the rural and the urban poor. So that's my own conclusion. If anybody else wants to say anything before we close, please. Do you want to give us some closing remarks?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me properly.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, just in closing, I just want to say that it's very important for us that have this knowledge to try to spread it as much as we can, especially understanding in the urban context that we're inside of, and try as much as possible to break these things down to people, because I'm sure that if people understood the kind of system that they're inside of, they'll be able to be more receptive of the other ideas that we're bringing up, and then of course to try to be an embodiment of the things that we talk about, and also to connect the happenings of our times to these things that we're talking about. Because if we don't connect the happenings to all these books, then it will seem as if we're just reading and reading for reading's sake. But when you say, oh, see what this man talked about in 1960 something or 1970, and it's still happening till today, then I think that will spark some sort of inquisitive this thing on the side of people that don't want to read, or that don't want to try to make out time to understand this thing. So it's very, very important, because even looking through the book and making the summary, it still kind of wows me, how these people took that time, in the heat of colonialist struggle, to come up with material that is still relevant like this till today. Like it's, I'm, really, really amazed by people like Fanon and all our revolutionary thinkers. So I encourage people to try to spread this message as much as possible and just try to connect these things to the material reality on ground so that it will have a living vibe in the minds of people, So yeah, that's my parting remark. Thank you.
Um, Thank you for the closing remark, Comrade Sukonin. Um, yeah, again, I'm deputizing for for Comrade Shango. He's not here, so Comrade Idris, Comrade Bumi, do you have any closing remarks you want
No, again, how can anyone really outdo Comrade OAG? I think, all that's to be heard has been heard. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful discussion. I enjoyed it as always, and I hope to have more of this in future.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and listening to me ramble. And I learned so much, and this has been really great. So I look forward to more of it in the future.